Good evening, everybody. Welcome to this Scrutiny Performance and Standards Committee meeting. Can I ask everybody to note the fire safety instruction that on hearing the alarm you should leave the chamber via the double doors at the back, exit the building through the main entrance and congregate in the car park. Also, please switch off or turn to silent, really, mobile devices and any other electronic devices. I would like to remind everyone present that this meeting is subject to an internet webcast recording where the proceedings are capable of repeated viewing. If you are seated in the public area of the council chamber, it is likely that your image will be captured by the recording cameras and result in your image becoming part of the broadcast. This may infringe your human rights, and if you wish to avoid this, you should leave the public seating area of the council chamber and move to the upper public gallery. If members are, for any reason, not present for the whole debate on an item, you should consider and seek advice as necessary on whether it would be appropriate for you to vote on that item. May I remind members to declare any interests when this item is raised on the agenda. Okay, so item 1, apologies for absence. Please, Ms. Folkes, any?
Thank you, Chair. Apologies have been received from Councillor Sunga with Councillor Barber substituting, and apologies from Councillor Davis with Councillor Martin Cuthbert substituting.
Great, thank you. Item 2, members, are there any declaration of interests you wish to raise? I can't see any hands, so moving on. Item 3, minutes of the previous minutes of the previous Scrutiny Performance and Standards Committee meeting held on, is that date correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, 18th of March 2025. Councillor Ben Rigby, please. Yep.
Thank you, Chair, and welcome to start of a new municipal year. I hope we're all looking forward to the proceedings this evening as much as I am, and indeed for the rest of the year. And we're also very much looking forward to your chairmanship of this committee over the next 12 months. In relation to 484, minutes of the previous meeting, item 1, I raised the issue of the need to flag the increase for the town twinning associations, both Roth and Montbazon. Obviously, the visits to those associations are due to take place this year. And I'm pleased to say that both seem to be oversubscribed. And we look forward to sending presidents there. I'd be grateful for confirmation that this was flagged to the Finance Director and whether this was discussed with the Finance and Resources Committee Chair, and if officers could write back to me in that respect.
Great, thank you. Any of our service to comment on that? Okay, we'll take that away, Councillor Rigby, and hopefully have an answer to you very quickly. Thank you. Yep, sorry, Councillor Barber.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of things. I thought we had agreed that we were going to record actions arising in a table within the minutes. I mean, there's a large number of items where there's verbal updates saying that there's going to be a planned meeting with a future committee with Sainsbury's. There's items about the members of the committee will be updated with further information. There really is no way of anyone really knowing whether all the actions have been completed or not. And I was going back, and I think it goes back for several meetings, but I thought we had agreed in principle that that would be implemented. Do we know why that still has not happened?
Yeah, we did agree in principle that it would be a running item. I think I need to discuss with the officers at a future chairs meeting about re-implementing that, because we did agree on that. Some of those items have been moved to the scrutiny work programme, but as I say, next officers meeting we'll talk about bringing that one back, because I think it was quite useful for members. Thank you. Councillor Wagland.
Yes, if I may, item 2 on 484, paragraph 484 on page 6 in relation to the minutes. We're there. I was very grateful to Councillor Rigby for offering to do a first draft. I think you actually did in relation to the planning conditions. You might want to record that. I think the last sentence doesn't make a whole lot of grammatical sense and might sensibly be reworded, including her being a bit like she being the cat's mother. I think probably do better than that. But in terms of proceeding with that, very happy to do this anyway, in which Councillor Rigby thinks it would help him to do the first draft, or to work together to produce the first draft. I have to say that my latest experience in dealing with the Carla Holmes development, which included the joy of spending an entire day trying to find the working hours planning condition, because it was buried in 95 pages of documents, including the construction management plan, which of course has got finalised after the planning permission, and so none of the important conditions for residents appears in there. Has come as something of an object lesson to me, so I'm really happy to get involved in relation to that.
Yep, great. Councillor Rigby, I think you want to build on that one.
Sorry.
Yes, thank you. Just to say, I agree with what Councillor Wagland says, and a joint approach I think would be appropriate in this case. Just by way of aside, I noticed that in relation to conditions, we may well come across this in a future item this evening in relation to item 5 and conditions, and so therefore that only highlights why I think that an approach from councillors on both sides of the aisle is important in this instance.
Yep, not just item 5, but this particular referral will also be brought up in item 7. So thank you. Is there anything else for item 3? Yep, Councillor.
So just as a supplementary to my first comment, could I just ask that we have an update as committee members, and myself as being present here today, on any outstanding actions and the status of those actions before the next scrutiny meeting, please? At least by an email. I think that would be quite useful to most of us.
Yep, we can. I'll take that away with officers and see what we can conjure up. Thank you. Councillor Slade.
Thank you, Chair. In the minutes, it references that I requested the water management plan to be reinstated to the forward plan. I just want to acknowledge that I will be addressing that at point 7. So I agree the minutes, but just to raise that I will be including that point at agenda item 7.
Yep, that's fine. Yeah, thank you. Okay, members, is it agreed that I sign as a correct record the minutes of the Scrutiny Performance and Standards Committee meeting held on 18th of March 2025, which begin on page 5 of the agenda? Yeah, sure, we can do that. Absolutely, no problem. Members, all agreed? Thank you. Right, okay, great, thank you, members. So moving on to item 4, which is the Infrastructure Funding Statement 23-24 update. The report begins on page 9 of the agenda. Officer Ms Goodings, do you have anything to add?
Thank you, Chair. So only just to say that this is obviously a return at the request of the Scrutiny Committee. We have done our very best to answer the questions which came up at the previous committee, but we are limited by the information that we have available to us. And again, we've spoken about that at previous committees. So we have, amended the IFS as much as possible and included responses to some of the specific questions within the report. Thank you.
Okay, great, thank you. Do we have any questions? Yes, Councillor. Sorry, Councillor Slade. I think I've got Officer Marcus Harton's head in the way, so I may be wishing, and I'll try and rely more on Councillor Gorton for any hands raised that I can't see. Councillor Swidgell, please.
I've got a question that's 1.9, and it's around the ongoing improvements to your S106 monitoring practices. I seem to recall that when we last spoke about this, records were being migrated into XCOM. I believe somebody was allocated to do this work. My comment, I suppose, is it seems to be taking quite a long time. Do you have any estimates for when this will be completed, and how far through is this work, and when can we expect them to see us draw a line under this?
Yeah, the XCOM system is updated with all the new Section 106s and is almost complete in terms of migrating the old Section 106 agreement, so that should be completed in the next month or so. There is, we are migrating as much information as we hold from previously, but of course you'll remember that this was something, Section 106 monitoring was outsourced to another authority previously, so the data that we have we're putting on XCOM, but we don't necessarily have some of the full details that that authority may have also held on our behalf.
Meaning what exactly?
That we are transferring all the information that we hold to XCOM, and that is almost complete.
That implies there's some holes and some gaps in the data. Yes.
Yes, I think it's fair to say that, and I think there was an audit in 2023 which highlighted some issues around process of Section 106. So the historic Section 106s are not in the most perfect condition in terms of the monitoring of how they were spent. But that is obviously something that we've addressed going forward with the XCOM system.
Great. Thank you, Councillor Gerard. I've got Councillor Melissa Slade next. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I have several questions. If I work backwards, if we go to page 22, so the total amount of money retained at the end of the reported year is 2,509,463.79. If I add up that table, I get 2,518,390.04. So my first point will be it's disappointing that after this committee raised the inaccuracies of these tables, that yet again we have a table that doesn't seem to add up. And it says that there's a retained amount, but again that's not listed as a column. So I just think, one, it's very poor that again the figures don't add up, but two, we're not given sufficient information on that point. Going to page 11, discrepancies in retained maintenance figures. Officers acknowledge the discrepancies identified in the retained maintenance figures. That implies that the discrepancies that we have brought to the officers' attention haven't been addressed, and the thing goes on to say, while it's not currently possible to refine the maintenance data further, I don't understand why, and there doesn't appear to be a reason given why. Likewise, I would then suggest that possibly we need to put a disclaimer on the website to advise that these figures are incorrect. The 1.9, the Section 106 monitoring practices, it says a dedicated Section 106 and field monitoring officer has been appointed. Can we ask who that is, please? And then going to the options, option 2, this would delay publication, may require additional resources. But when I actually look at the minutes from January, it says that officers advised the deadline was the 31st of December 24 for the data and unaware of any penalties. And if we go to the financial implications, there are no financial implications directly from this report. This report again seems to contradict itself. There seems to be errors, so obviously if the officer could address those, please, I'd be grateful.
Yeah, I think I will let Officer Aaron Goodings answer, and I may well come in myself. Let's see.
Thank you. So yeah, there is an officer in post. It's currently filled by a contractor and it reports to the Corporate Manager for Planning Policy. So if you have any particular queries, probably best to go through myself and Jonathan, and they will transfer them to the consultant we have in post if that's something that's part of the role that they're doing at present. Yeah, I mean, as 1.8 acknowledges, we are aware of those discrepancies. Those are the figures that have been provided to us through the finance system, and what we have tried to get to the bottom of it and are not able to. Hence the paragraph in 1.8. There is a disclaimer on the website which was requested at one of the previous meetings. I'm very happy for that to remain in place for this IFS, and as we say, going forward. For the next IFS, which will be published in December this year, we expect these issues, as far as any new money is coming through, will be resolved. Obviously, there are inherent issues with some of the previous funding, which we won't be able to address in the December 2025 one, but we will be able to make sure we are making sure that everything is correct going forward. So, yeah, appreciate that it's not ideal that table still doesn't add up, but we have interrogated it with the finance team as much as we are able to.
I appreciate your honesty regarding the table, but it's unfair that as scrutiny we've got to add that up and work that out and ask you about that. So if you know that table's incorrect, should that not be on the report? This is the scrutiny committee.
1.8 was an attempt to tell you that officers acknowledged the discrepancies identified in the retained maintenance figure. If that wasn't explicit enough, I apologise for that.
Okay, Councillor Barber, please.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, apologies if I've misunderstood anything. Please interrupt me if I have. So we discussed these numbers being wrong in December of last year, and back then the conversation we had, and it was confirmed to me in an email, was that it was really because we were managing the system using an Excel spreadsheet, and that migrating to the Exocom system was going to resolve it. There was certainly, on the email I received on the 27th of December, there was never any kind of like there's certain things that we're not going to be able to solve. So I think the two recommendations in front of us, approve the recommendation knowing that the numbers are wrong, isn't something that I feel comfortable voting for. And even the option 2, request additional work before approval, given it's 6 months after I first raised it and I had an email assurance as a councillor, having challenged it in the meeting that I substituted back then, talks about additional costs to the council, and I really do think this is part of the day job as, in terms of running the council out of the existing allocation of staff headcount and resources. I don't think we should be told there's additional work to that would need to be resourced from outside. I think that's unacceptable to come back to the council in this state, truthfully. So that's a comment. My question is, I mean, if I look at this report, under risks and opportunities and financial implications, surely if we haven't got a handle on Section 106 money, there's a risk that we will not spend in the allotted areas all of the money that's available to this council. And my understanding is that those Section 106 payments are time limited. So if we're not managing this properly, there is a chance that we may lose the ability to spend certain money to improve things like parks and play areas and goodness knows what else. So I don't understand how we can be asked to approve a report that says there's none arising directly from this report, because I think common sense states that it is. Have I misunderstood something, please?
Is it possible, Officer Goodness, to put some of these implications in at all?
We can add some implications in if members would want us to do that, either now or afterwards. In terms of the additional resource, as I say, I think we've done everything we can internally to interrogate the figures. If you want to go beyond that, I think I'd need to speak to the Director of Finance about how we go about doing anything more than we've already done in-house. And that's something I can take away if members aren't happy to approve this report.
Yeah, go on.
Sorry, with respect, that doesn't answer my question. My question was, is the council at risk of losing the ability to spend these sums of money because we don't understand how much is left in the pot to spend? And that's a yes or no. And then, if that's a yes, there are risks to this council outside of any other risks of perhaps financial implications of paying external staff. I mean, what's the money that potentially could expire that we don't spend and we forego as a council? That's my main question.
Sorry, Councillor Barber, I missed that one. No, so we do not believe we're at risk of losing any money. You'll see that there's just over 2.3 million unallocated funds. The Policy and Strategy Committee approved a SIL and Section 106 monitoring board, which is being set up, and that will be able to monitor that spend with officers, and then through that committee with members to make sure that all that money is allocated appropriately and spent appropriately. But I am happy to add in some extra wording around the financial risk section, if that would be helpful, just setting out a bit more detail about that.
I think it would, but can I have Councillor Rigby and then, Councillor Wagland afterwards?
Thank you, Chair. Obviously in 1.9 it says officers are working closely with the finance team to enhance record keeping and financial reconciliation, which is fundamental to the confidence that members would have in this report. That confidence is, if not shaken, perhaps mildly wobbled when there are discrepancies on what some would describe as basic arithmetic, or others would say are fundamental calculations of value. Leaving that particular point to one side, the confidence of members is important because they don't wish officers to complete reports in what may be, through pressure of business or otherwise, a formulaic way. We expect full reports which identify the risks that are there. We recognise that the use of a template, it's a necessary evil because it implies a common standard across officers. But in using that template, you have to be prepared to diverge from it so that you can spell out the risks, even if they may seem obvious to you in oral explanation, which we have had and I have been reassured by. Members of the public who aren't necessarily going to dial in for this would want to read the report and see the derogations there. Now, I don't think that is a particularly political point, but I do think there's an element of reassurance that's required. And so, with that in mind, I have to say, minded that perhaps this needs further work.
Councillor Wagland.
Thank you very much, Chair. I think the point, particularly in relation to risks, is not confined to the points we've so far been discussing. So if we take one example, we have the Mount Lessing scrapyard contribution. We have under that a local equipped area for play and a neighbourhood equipped area for play. So those are specific allocations for the financial contribution. If we can't get a proper handle on what is available, places like Mountney Close, which might or might not qualify, but certainly it seems to me might qualify, and which are in an appalling state, quite possibly still unsafe, might be able to be attaching that money sooner rather than later. So my worry is that exactly, I think, as Councillor Rigby was saying, the public want to know, being brutal about this, how much the council is sitting on and why. And they want it allocated and used as soon as possible. And if you wanted any evidence of that, I think the opposing parties in the coalition were both of that view at the recent full council at Essex County Council, where they made a great play of the fact that they wanted to know why there was a large sum of money sitting by way of planning contributions. So I think this document is really important. It's important for the public who will want to know, and it's important for councillors to be able to then pass that information on with some reassurance to them, or indicate why we can't reassure. But I am concerned that the risks include, for example, not being able to do something that we might otherwise be able to do with the money, which in turn may lead to other risks, for example, in relation to our responsibilities over play areas.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Councillor Wagland. Councillor Slade.
Thank you, Chair. It's just to say that Councillor Gerard, Councillor Barber, myself, Councillor Wagland and Councillor Rigby have all spoken very eloquently and raised sufficient points of concern on this item, and just that I completely agree with Councillor Rigby's comments about this item should come back. I have very little confidence in this item, and I'm now reaching the point, but we are the Scrutiny Committee, and I just think it's unfair that potentially that we're being asked to recommend a report that can compromise this committee and the integrity of this committee.
Great. Also, I'm minded that this is the second time it's come back to this committee. It's also been to assets, I believe, also. What is a good way of approaching this so we can avoid it coming back? Also bear in mind that we've got a future IVES statement for the next period in time. Over to you.
So what I would say, the IFS is a government mandated report. So the A, B, C, D, E, E and F, etc. that you see in it is government requirement. So that's why it's set out in the way that it is. I think if members would like to, once we've completed the work on XCOM, which should be very soon, we can circulate the pull-out from that, which is the full list of all the Section 106s that we have and the spend dates and what they're spent on, if that would sort of reassure members and give members the opportunity then to comment on that. That's what we were going to do through the Section 106 and SIL board anyway, so we can certainly pull that through to members of the scrutiny panel. In terms of the information within here itself, as I say, most of this comes from the finance team, so I would need to talk to David Dickinson about whether there is any other scrutiny that we can carry out to try and get to the bottom of the concerns that scrutiny are raising. And on the risk point, the new ModGov system means that the individual directors will be pulling out certainly and approving the reports. This report, I think this committee just sort of was on the borderline of us introducing that. So with all reports going forward, they'll have sign off from finance director and others. So any of those issues might also be picked up at a director or strategic director level before reports are published.
Yes, Councillor.
Given the comment that was just made about that in future reports will be signed off by the finance director, can we as a scrutiny committee ask that this one is? Yeah. And if that finance director is unwilling to sign off, then that should be telling us something.
Also, Emma Goods.
Yes, I think it's just a process point that the new system that we've got formalises a process where lots of different directors go formally through the report. So yeah, as I say, the finance team have been fully involved in all the figures that are in this report. But if I'm happy to send this to David and get him to send to the scrutiny committee an email if that would be helpful on this point, or we can address it another way.
Yes, Councillor.
Could I just perhaps suggest then that we ask Mr Dickinson to come back to the next meeting of this committee where this report is represented with any amendments required so that he is happy to put his signature to it as finance director. And then I think this committee would be in a much better position to make a judgment.
Councillor Gerald.
Yeah, just to go back to your point about pulling the data out of Exicom. I mean, I understand there is a template, it all has to be presented in a particular way, but if there is information that can be given to us that will supplement that, then I think that will be very helpful and answer some of our questions. And obviously, I appreciate this is an old report now, but I don't want to be sat here in November, December when we're looking at the most recent one having the same concerns. So I think if we can get this right now, then it will help us next time round.
Yeah, totally, Councillor Gerald. I think we need to ascertain a process for this one, so we're getting it right for the next one. Just bear with me a few moments, members. Thanks. Okay, members. I think we take on board the comments that have been rightly brought up. I'm happy to see that some of the other stuff that was brought up in the other previous committee on this one has been actioned, but there's been some more action points that need to be taken ahead, including with the finance director. We'll defer this back to another committee and have discussions with the chairs and the officers and the finance lead and sorry, not lead, finance officer, and come back to you on this one again. Because essentially we want to make sure we get this one right. So as Councillor Giles has said, we get the next one right. Essentially, yeah. So if we're all agreed on that approach, we'll do that one. Yep. Okay. Thank you. Okay. Item 5 is the strategy nuisance ombudsman complaint progress update. So the report begins on page 25 of the agenda. Mr. Paul Brace, do you have anything to add?
So, members, this is the second time this item has come to you, and I'm glad to report that quite a lot of work has been going on. So we do have a new set of procedures which are in place and operating, and in line with what was required, we have a single point of contact for the resident, which is the Deputy Chief Executive. We have taken action. There has been an abatement order around extraction system, and the teams are working together on noise and licensing around that. We remain in contact with the resident, and there's been recent and regular conversations around that. And the Ombudsman has been in touch with us to understand progress, and they are satisfied with what we have done so far. So to confirm, we do meet with residents regularly. All recommendations have now been implemented. We remain in correspondence with the resident, and we have contacted other residents in the locality to see if there are any further complaints. Just to say, one of the things that we will be doing, which is something that come up on the Housing Improvement Board, which is our service standards are unclear. It's not for the council to put its procedures into the public domain, because that would be a very boring document for people to go through, but certainly the service standards of how long we should be taking to do things, when we will take action, and more importantly, when we won't take action, needs to be set out clearly. So we will be building those up, and we'll be bringing those to the relevant policy committee. I'll happily take any questions, but in terms of the Ombudsman complaint, the complaint still remains open. But we are dealing with it as a set of services rather than one service.
Okay, great, thank you. We've got a number of people who wish to speak. So, Councillor Ben Rigby, do you want to go ahead first? Thank you.
I'm going to pick my words quite carefully, but that doesn't mean I'm going to mince them. I am aware of the circumstances as ward member in relation to this case. Other members of this committee or its predecessors may be aware of other similar reports. That is as much as I intend to say in relation to those. However, I was aware through my predecessors who represented Hutton East of the circumstances in relation to this matter. I am naturally disappointed at the Ombudsman's findings, and perhaps more so find myself in agreement with their findings, if not in their totality, then certainly in terms of their spirit. This is, of course, if I can put it modestly, a learning opportunity for this council, but that doesn't quite cover the egregious nature of the behaviours that the resident has suffered, and suffered is not an inappropriate word to use this, and the individual itemisation of compensation, I think, provides some small insight into the distress and harm that may have been suffered by them. I'm pleased to see that there's action being taken on this, because they're very much needed to be. And I'm looking forward to seeing this resolved. Can I add a request, which is that a copy of this paper and the report from the Ombudsman go to my fellow ward members for their information, and I leave it to other members to comment on the report.
Thank you, Councillor Ben Rigby. Also, Paul, both of you, you happy to furnish the documents necessary to ward members? That would be appreciated. Okay, great, thank you. Councillor Wagland.
Thank you very much indeed, Chair. It was down to me, I think, that this came, and I am still somewhat shocked and disappointed that it hadn't been circulated in full as a document before it got to me raising it at scrutiny. It came as a link in relation to the scrutiny document, and my understanding, I think, of the letter, but certainly the spirit of what was being said by the Ombudsman was that it should be known about by all relevant staff and, more or less suggested all staff, but certainly by all members of the council. And what worries me about this is we've only addressed so far up to point 6 on page 31, because there were two elements to the Ombudsman's recommendations, and it's the second half of his, or her, I'm not sure which it is, recommendations that drew my attention when I actually buried myself in the thing, having just spotted the link and thought, well, I'll see what it actually says. And it seems to me to be an admirable summary of what a local authority's environmental licensing and planning teams should do when they're dealing with complaints coming in, particularly those that relate to the environment. And I think you can take that in as wide a way as the Ombudsman does. So at 7, review its arrangements for collaborative working between its environmental health, licensing and planning teams and ensure a clear process is in place for environmental health consultation on planning applications. Pausing there, it goes on at 8 to set out that, and this is what should be available to the public and to members who are picking up these complaints. So it is a clear process with timescales for investigation of all statutory nuisances. Now, my biggest concern since coming to this council is, unlike almost any other council I've ever worked for or with, we don't really seem to get a grip of the possibilities that statutory nuisances provide for us. We seem to work on the basis it's bound to be too difficult. And I don't know what Councillor Rigby thinks, but I'm certainly of the view that you get a very good hearing from the magistrates on a statutory nuisance claim, and of course that residents can do it for themselves, which raised one of the other points on paragraph 8 at page 32, which is a point which I've been actively discouraged by the council from doing, with the result that I haven't been able to give the residents what I think is the right answer to a particular problem, which is that we set a threshold at which the council will make complainants aware of their right to go to the magistrates' court direct. My experience is that magistrates, being very much like our residents, don't take very kindly to environmental matters and are much, much more concerned than we tend to be. So there is a list here, and I was so impressed with that I'm now giving it to all my ward members in my division and saying, look, we really need to be making sure that we follow this. Now, we've told the Ombudsman we've done all this. I can cite 2 immediate environmental complaints that I have sitting on my desk, just 2, I mean, I think it applies to most of them, where we're not even beginning to do that. If you take the Toby Priory matter, we had a meeting with the MP and the various officers. It's a very, very serious set of allegations by local residents and a serious set of breaches acknowledged by the developer. And to my amazement, after the end of that meeting, I was really delighted that we'd had a list of things that we would get, and there would be lots and lots of correspondence and so on. And so far, unless my computer has completely failed me, I have seen nothing, and I've rung the MP and he hasn't had anything either. So that's several months. Now, I don't see any sign that we are, at the beginning of a complaint, saying to the residents, right, this is what we're going to do, here are the timescales within which we are going to do it, and then showing that we are getting back. I see from the document subsequently that we're talking about 28 days for doing various things. As we all know, 28 days very rapidly gets you to 12, and that's a year gone by. Most of these things do not require 28 days. Certainly getting, in this case, on my Toby Priory one, there are plenty of things that we should be getting that don't require 28 days. And mostly, when I sit in relation to a planning matter, and Councillor Gorton and I have sat on one or two together with officers, the environmental officer sits there, but actually generally says that it's too difficult to do anything. And most of the really good councils at this are doing all sorts of wonderful things, including my favourite remedy, which is the Proceeds of Crime Act, where landlords are taking advantage by getting rent because somebody is actually doing something that's non-conforming. And Councillor Rigby and I have talked about this, but in Manchester, they've managed to kill off quite a few of their more difficult cases by saying that whoever is the landlord doesn't have to know anything about it, it just has to be profiting from it, and can deal with that. So for me, this is a lost opportunity. We can put this in, we can actually produce a proper enforcement policy in relation to these sorts of matters. And then Councillor Rigby and I will have a better shot at getting planning conditions which will also help to support that.
Okay, great. Thank you, Councillor Wagan. Members, if we try and stick to 3 minutes if we can, please, and be succinct, and individual cases, if can be brought up in the members' portal, of course. Officer Paul Procey, have you got anything you wish to add on that?
I would say, Councillor Wagland, we're working from a quite low base. So we did have procedures. Those procedures have been updated. I am in total agreement with you. We do need an enforcement policy, but certainly that will take some time to consider to make sure we get that right. But in the meantime, we will be doing service standards which should give all residents, whatever their issues, clear guidelines as to what will happen, when it will happen, where they report, how they report, and what they should expect to see. And we're going to do that certainly by September to have those hopefully agreed at committee. But policy will take, because enforcement is just not in one department, which is another criticism through the Ombudsman, will take some time to consider that to get that right.
Point then, because my understanding was that all these items, including the overall reviews, were ones which the Ombudsman directed, and we have told the Ombudsman we have 100% complied, and we've told the Ombudsman that because we've 100% complied with the ones that relate to the person that Mr. Councillor Rigby is mentioning. We have not done the ones that he set out from 7 onwards, and I think we should be quite clear that we haven't done that, because otherwise it seems to me we're not telling him the correct position.
Yep. Thank you.
All the things that were requested to be done have been done. A review of the policy needs to be done, but the policy fits with all the things that we've got here. We need to update our policy fully. We agreed with the Ombudsman that the procedures would be updated. That has been agreed, and they have been updated and are quite clearly in operation.
Not Toby Priory, not happening on your environmental complaints about fly tips, Chrissy? Sorry, concerned about this.
Try and keep
fly tipping is not statutory nuisance. The Ombudsman is dealing with statutory nuisance. If we're talking about enforcement policy, that draws in all sorts of other enforcement that isn't statutory nuisance.
Okay, Councillor Gerald.
I just wanted to go to point 10, which is around sharing the final report and then having a committee with responsibility for the relevant issues to reflect on their lessons learned. What's meant by that?
That will be being brought back to scrutiny, so there should be a report each year. Zoe will correct me, but Ombudsman lessons learned from that, which there is significant learning in this particular complaint, which we will be working on going forward. I'll clarify to Councillor Wagland, sorry, that I know things are changing because I know from our ASB complaints that the teams are now working together far better in delivering better outcomes for our tenants and non-tenants. So I can see that working in practice now. So that's a lesson learned that's been learned from this particular Ombudsman complaint.
Thank you.
May just come back on
So,
that.
hold on, well,
I ju-
Councillor
I-
Wagner, yeah,
this is
but
really
there are other people on the list, so other people on the list. So if I can come to them, and then I'll come back to you as I always do. Yeah. Councillor Slade's had her turn, and I just said I will go back to Councillor Slade. So if you want to go, Councillor Slade, yeah.
Sorry, myself and Councillor Gerard both thinking alike. On page 53, a committee responsibility of relevant issues to reflect on the lessons learned. And obviously, I want to clarify, because this appears to be covered by multiple committees, just that confirmation that this is the committee referred to is scrutiny, as obviously as Councillor Gerard pointed out on number 10 on page 33, and obviously on page 53 it says to share a report with relevant staff. I'm just hoping that obviously that would also include members of the relevant committee.
Sorry, we consider that it would be a scrutiny function for all the Ombudsman's complaints and the lesson learned from all of those and what's been put in place. Yes. And
shared report with relevant staff and the committee.
Okay, no, thank you. Sorry, so there was a slight confusion in the names, and I believe it is now your turn, Councillor Palmer. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. A couple of questions for Mr. Brace. So one of the things that could have been improved slightly about the report, in my opinion, is that against the completed updates, it would have been lovely to know when. To give an idea of the timescale it took to us to actually apologise to the Ms. X, when was the action plan actually produced and circulated? There's a few things in terms of a scrutiny committee you would want to see. I would actually want to see a sample of the letter that went out to residents who had who were deemed as in scope for item 6. I don't think, if we're going to be scrutinising something and we're the appropriate committee, it would have been nice to have seen an example of one of those anonymised. The collaborative working, it's always very difficult in accounts, so I get that, but the actual report for the collaborative working, the framework, whether it's a RACI, you know, who's responsible, who's accountable, who's consulted, who's informed, where is that anywhere in this deck? Because I don't see it. A couple of things. We're saying that we're going to issue reminders to staff. Again, I'd like to see a copy of the email. I would also like to know how many letters we sent out to potentially eligible people who might be considering making a complaint. Knowing the scope and the size doesn't give you any detail about the individual complaint, but it would give this committee more information to decide whether this was a very exceptional event or something that happens much more than you would like or expect. So I think it's a little bit short on detail, which would make me very reluctant to vote for it in its current form. And also under financial implications, I don't know, again, you know, how there can be no financial implications for a report like this, but potentially is trying to address and reduce the risk of making payments to residents for mishandling cases. Surely there are financial implications, and some of those it should be more than just there are no financial implications directly from this report. It's a common theme across the council. Risks and financial implications are seldom detailed in the real world. But those will be my comments, and I'm just a bit disappointed that some of the detail's not there.
Thank you, Councillor Barber. Officer Paul Brace.
Some good points made there, Councillor. Thank you. And certainly I can make some of that information available. I would say, from memory, this is September 23, and there's been a number of people in my position and other positions, so it has not made everything as easy as it could have been for me to pull that together. And certainly in terms of financial implications, I absolutely get your point. This is talking about the financial implications of this report. But the wider ones, clearly if we don't get our complaints processes right in any one of our departments, then we are obviously open to ombudsman complaints and further compensation requirements. So, but fully take your point on that. But I will ensure I get better information for future reports like this.
Just on the subject of, the racy matrix of, responsibility between teams, because that is one where it can always go astray.
Well, to explain the process that we currently have, so there is a weekly meeting on a Monday morning. I usually attend. If not, it will be led by a community safety manager. Attendance at that are all the relevant parties. We talk about all issues that are rising, any challenges that we're getting, any complaints that we've had, any issues around community safety, enforcement, etc. So that is a regular meeting that we pick that up. What that's enabled is good relationships to be built across the departments that generally get the enforcement issues. But I will certainly get to you how that matrix works of who's responsible for what and where. But not a problem.
Great. Thank you, Councillor Barber. Thank you, Officer Paul Brace. Moving on. Sorry, go ahead.
One of the major failings that we found a constant, and this one would have been no different, is the recording of issues, so data sheets. So you can make a complaint about anything, but then certainly through environmental health, you'll get a data sheet that will ask you to record when these things are happening. That wasn't working very well. So there is now a joint system that we're using, which is an app that we can give to residents. So that then records far better. That also records sound, so you can make diary entries, but you can also record sound or even take a video of something happening, which is very good evidence for us to be able to prosecute. It's one thing filling in a diary sheet and getting some evidence, but the app makes that far greater. That means that planning, environmental health and community safety have got a far better chance of getting a good outcome for residents if we've got really good evidence to put forward to stop whatever it is happening.
Great, thank you, Officer Paul Brace. Councillor Ben Rigby, please.
Thank you. In relation to any correspondence, obviously the complainants has the benefit of a duty of privacy, and so therefore any correspondence that might be circulated to a committee on instances of this kind has to protect those privacy rights. For the alternative is to take them into pink, which then defeats the public scrutiny aspects of it not being available to the public. So I take on board what Councillor Barber says in that respect, but we must also strike that delicate balance. I'm heartened by what Mr. Brace says.
Just to be absolutely clear, I was asking for a copy of the generic letter, nothing specific to any individual or any individual case, but the generic letter that's been sent out to a multitude of potential applicants. I imagine that they are not tailored to the instance.
I'm delighted to hear Councillor Barber's clarification of that point, which of course is important across all sides of this room, that we maintain the delicacy of the process whilst rigorously examining its outcomes. The point I was going to make before Councillor Barber's helpful intervention was that there are positives which Mr. Brace has outlined in relation to the future avoidance of such things. I'm grateful for his honest and frank admissions to this committee, which I think have been given in a spirit of truth, and I think we should respect those and seek to move forward accordingly.
Yeah, Yes, great. Thank you, Councillor Ben Rigby. Councillor Martin Cuthbert. Oh, misrecorded hand, apparently. Sorry about that. Yeah. Councillor Wagner, it is your turn. Please, 3 minutes, and if you can keep
Chair,
cases
we haven't done this with others and with other
no,
items.
sorry, Councillor Wagland, I have given you lots of time, more so than any other councillor. I'm giving you more time. What I'm about to say, if you can keep to 3 minutes, any other cases can you put to the members' portal, because we've all got cases of a similar nature.
I quite understand, but this is serious. So, if I may say so, the report says within 3 months of the... can we park for the moment, because I think this muddling of the two situations is very unfortunate. The first and most important thing is, I'm taking it as read. Paul, you've done a very good job of explaining what you've done in relation to the residents. Councillor Rigby is happy with what you've done as far as I can see, and so far as he knows about that, so be it. I park that. This is about the second set of recommendations, and they had a deadline of within 3 months of the date of this report. So they weren't muddled up with the other stuff. This was what had to be done about all our future complaints. So, review arrangements for collaborative working between environmental health licensing and planning teams. This is all on page 52, and ensure a clear process is in place. What is that process? Review our policies in consultation with the planning team where needed to address the faults identified. In carrying out the review, we have to have a clear process with timescales for investigation of all statutory nuisances, not just noise and licensing breaches. How the council will consider how often and at what times of the day it will visit to monitor reported issues, expectations for regular communications with residents, the threshold at which, this point about telling people they have private law rights, which we are flagrantly in breach of in my view, and the threshold at which they can go to the magistrates' court separately, and how we're going to keep records. And then Councillor Barber has dealt with the other ones. But that part we have said that we have done. And we said that to the Ombudsman. We said and we have recorded it in the last report as 100% complete. So I would like to know how we've done that in light of what is obvious from anybody's inbox in relation to environmental matters at the moment.
Mr. Corporate, do you have anything to add?
Other than all procedures have been updated, that will cover all those points that you've raised, Councillor Wagland. They are on page 34. We have got procedures that outline. No, I understand they're not in front of you today, but they're operational procedures that have been reviewed, which those will then be the service standards that we will publish. But we have those in place. We have those working. It does cover all the complaints that will be received by in terms of environmental, and that will be noise nuisance, but equally they will also cover those around antisocial behaviour and other issues that we've got going across the borough. So that's what we will be pulling together. That was, as I say, as you quite rightly pointed out, September 23, the procedures. I haven't got the date of when they were put in place, but they have been in place for some time. And I apologise, I have to find that out. But I wasn't here on that date, but they would have been done in that time.
Okay. Also, Paul President, when can we be furnished with this information?
First thing tomorrow.
Yeah, can it be circulated to all members of the Scrutiny Committee? That would be fantastic. Great. Okay, great, thank you. I don't see, yes, Councillor Ben Rigby.
Would it be perhaps helpful that if there were any matters upon which Councillor Wagner wanted reassurance not capable of being dealt in this meeting, that the officer write to her specifying in more detail than you might currently have at present, so that that information was provided to her for her information and hopefully her satisfaction if it's not capable of being dealt with now? I merely venture it in the spirit of moving things on positively as we move to future items, but say no more on that.
Great idea. Thank you, Councillor Ben Rigby. Members, I think we've debated this. I will move the recommendation. Do I have a seconder? Great, thank you. Yes, Councillor Bob. Yeah.
Sorry, can I just request if I may have a seconder for a recorded vote, please?
Yep, that's fine. Yeah. Second. I just need to find the recommendation. So the recommendation that the committee review the progress against the recommendation made by the Local Government and Social Care Ombudsman in relation to the statutory nuisance investigations as detailed in the report. All those for?
Can I do the recorded vote?
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Yeah.
Thank you, members. Can you all state for, against or abstain when I call your name? Councillor Naylor?
For.
Councillor Gorton? For. Councillor Martin Cuthbert?
For.
Councillor Gelderbloom? Yes. Councillor Gerard? For. Councillor Rigby?
For.
Councillor Slade? Yes. Councillor Barber?
Yes.
Councillor Wagland? Yes. Thank you, Chair. That's 5 for the motion, the recommendation, 4 against the recommendation. That's carried.
Okay, great. Thank you, members, for your input. Moving on to item 6, which is, I believe, the Ash Dieback policy on the page. Yes, indeed it is. The report begins on page 55 of your agenda. I think this is the 4th time overall in the council that we've discussed this. It's the 3rd time that I think it's been back to this committee. The action plan has been developed in conjunction with qualified expert agriculturalists and is based on best practice. I have arranged for a working group which has been attended cross-party, and I have also arranged for an external consultant who is here today to help answer any questions. Mr. Houghton, do you have anything you wish to add?
Good evening, members. Just to introduce to you, on my far left here is Mr. Poston, arboricultural consultant of Hallwood Associates. I've nothing really further to say, just to thank members for the working group for the constructive manner which I felt the meetings were held, and for valued input and recommendations that you put forward. They were genuinely appreciated by myself, and I hope the report and the action plan reflects those to your satisfaction. Happy to take any questions. Thank you.
No questions, eh? Cool. Go on in, Councillor Slade.
Thank you, Chair. Actually, I would like to take this opportunity to express my thanks to Councillor Aspinall. In his capacity as the then Chair of Clean and Green, acknowledged my points of concern regarding the then proposed Ash Dieback policy and recommended this item was referred to scrutiny to consider this matter and the effect on the borough and its residents. I'd also like to thank Councillor Barber, Councillor Gerard, Councillor Wagland for their time and support, Councillor Gorton, who has undertaken his own site visit and has seen the impact on Hare Hall Shore, and to you, Chair, for deferring this item in December. Whilst I was dismayed this took from the September 24 deferral until March 25 for the membership of this working group to be formed, I am grateful for the time from all who attended the working group and for the work undertaken by Mr Poston. I do believe that this item has proved the effectiveness of the Scrutiny, Performance and Standards Committee, including holding to account senior officers about the decision and performance, along with making evidence-based recommendations to the proposed policy, which then became an action plan. However, it is disappointing my research and points raised at committee were not acknowledged until the same research and points were included in the report by Mr Poston. Had there been communication and recognition, this may have prevented or reduced the consultancy costs incurred. Likewise, if, as members requested at both Clean and Green and this committee, for the attendance at committee of the current Brentwood Borough Council arboriculturist, an accredited QTIER officer who has undertaken contract research with Oxford University into Royal Ashton Climate, Dr Richard Palsy, who has contributed to the East Anglian Tree and Landscape Officer Group, aptly known as ETALOG, which the Suffolk County Council Ash Health Assistance System references, the ETALOG Clara Action Kit, along with managing the borough's ash and the impact of Ash Dieback since 2014, This may have brought further clarity and again prevented or reduced consultancy costs. Both the approved woodland management plan and tree policy together ensure that the urban forests and woodlands are accessible to all, encouraging their use, fostering species diversity, encourage habitat development, woodland and urban protection into the future by the use of dynamic woodland and urban management, thus providing an acceptably safe natural environment for the public to derive, benefit and enjoy. With the proactive woodland management plan from 2018 fully acknowledging that in recent decades the management of new pests and diseases, particularly Massara disease of plane, oak processionary moth and Clara ash dieback, has become increasingly important. This action plan should complement both the approved woodland management plan and tree policy and not prevent the management of ash dieback nor new pests and disease. As Councillor Aspinall said, we need to get this right, and this committee has demonstrated that with respect, effective and at times frank communication and dedicated cross-party commitment, we have contributed to the ambitions for a cleaner, greener, safer borough and effective management of ash trees and ash dieback. My further points on the report would be, just to clarify that with points 1.1 and 3.3, we're actually referring to urban ash, and that under the key actions on regarding 7.2.3, just the actual definition of a local contractor, and if we are able to specify there that the use of HVO by the contractors, or if not, how they can offset the impact of the climate. On action 7.5.3, I'd just like to acknowledge the work of the volunteers and the use of brush to create the deadwood hedge. My other recommendations on the key actions would be just to reference our own monitoring of key specimens of coppice ash. I fully acknowledge that there are now 2 key specimens that are in Hare Hall Shore, so that's in the woodland, but obviously if we can just ensure that we do monitor any key specimens both in the woodland and the urban environment, and also just to ensure that we are releasing the timber value. On the climate and environment implications.
Sorry, Councillor, have we got too much longer because it's
No, honestly, thank you. I appreciate that, Chair, but the climate and environment implications I just feel should be a more balanced view, i.e. need to reflect the Renethia Coppicing the impact on flora and fauna. So I would just like to thank obviously this committee, the officers and the working group. I think we've provided a strong action plan that does complement the woodland management plan and the tree policy. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Councillor Slade. There was a lot in that statement, so I'm not too sure whether it's Marcus Hudson's able to answer it all. So this is why members, if you can try and keep things succinct, it'll be easier for officers to answer, essentially. But so, Officer Marcus Hudson.
Sorry, so was there specific questions, or was it more of an acknowledgement of the work that we've done? Yeah.
So yeah, it's just acknowledging the work, and just obviously my point, I just feel that points 1.1 and 3.3 refer more to urban than woodland. I just was obviously just asking clarification for the committee. Just with the action points, just obviously the definition of a local, and obviously the management of monitoring key specimens of coppice ash. And just as I say, I just felt with the environmental implications, we could have just given a more balanced view, i.e. that if a tree is felled, especially in a woodland environment, the impact on flora and fauna, because obviously the increase in light. So that was my my point.
So I think the one around the environmental considerations, I know what you're saying. I mean, and I'll report that back to Henry Muss, just a consideration in the future. With regards to the local contractors, I think it's always a bit of a difficult definition. I think of what it doesn't necessarily mean to the borough, but I think it just means to the area. And so, you know, I'd be a bit reluctant to say, you know, I think you have to be slightly pragmatic about that approach. In terms of the first, it is more urban trees. I think we said this before. We acknowledge that the woodlands can be managed in a slightly different way, but nevertheless the policy or the action plan should still be applied in that situation. So hopefully that covers those costs. But I mean, again, just like to reiterate that thank you for the work. And I do note your points that you're making. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Councillor Rigby.
Thank you, Chair. Let me start my remarks, which will hopefully be brief, by thanking the members opposite for their diligence and consideration of this issue. I myself am not terribly familiar with such issues, but I find that I have moved from a marsh of comparative ignorance to a thicket of awareness and understanding, and that is in no small part to Councillor Slade's efforts. So let me place them on record. I know there have been some spirited discussions on that, but we in this council are afraid of spirited discussions, as long as they lead to positive outcomes, which I know is something that all members share. From my relative position of ignorance, which I confess, I mean, the action plan looks like it's practical, it looks like it's useful, it looks like it's been reviewed, revised and scrutinised with a great deal of thoroughness, thanks to all members. I hope that it's based on best practice, and I hope that we can adopt it so we can get on with dealing with ash dieback, which is, you know, a real issue in our borough and for our much-loved woodlands, especially at a time when we should value our woodlands more than ever before. And that's a point made by the leader of this council, who I know values arboriculture dearly, and arboriculturalists. This will enable us to give staff and contractors the ability to move forward quickly and efficiently, which I think is a good thing. So we move on. But rather than give a long list of members who've contributed to it, I would like to stress that we are at council at our best when we deal with things at pace, collectively and considerately. And that's the end of my sub-2-minute presentation.
Absolutely, thank you, Councillor Benriggy. Councillor Keith Bob.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to thank the officers for the report. I would also like to thank Councillor Slade for all the hard work and effort that she's put into this subject over the last year or so. I think that we've had some very good discussions. A couple of things really. The quantified tree risk assessment. So it sounds wonderful and very standardised, but obviously in order to use that methodology, we obviously need to have the right resource ongoing, and I see that you're going to, under financial implications, you say we're going to come back with a fully costed management budget. It would be nice if when this came to clean and green, you had an indication at least of an estimate of what that budget would be looking at, because it would be useful to know the context if you're going to apply a methodology, what the cost of that methodology is ongoing. Under that methodology, what happens if we have ad hoc residents ringing up saying, I think I've got some ash behind my house and they need to be checked out? Is the operating model that the council's got to ensure that we have someone suitably trained in-house longer term so that you can send them out for the 1-hour inspection rather than paying for 1 day of a consultant's time, no offence, to actually travel to the site from wherever in the country, do the inspection and then to travel back? Because it does seem to me, for it to be successful, the methodology, you really do need someone who's QTRA qualified in the council to do those inspections rather than going out to external resource every time for every individual tree.
Yes, Officer Marcus.
I think the short answer to say is yes, yeah, but that is our plans to do in-house.
Yes, Councillor Wakeland.
Thank you. Who is the QTRA officer?
So it's not a QTRA officer, so it's who's QTRA qualified. So usually be a woodland officer or an arboricultural officer, you'd expect to have a QTRA qualification. But at this time we are using external consultants to undertake that work.
Do you have the costs overall?
Yes, those can be provided, yes.
Great. Thank you, members, for all your input on this one. Yeah, go ahead, yeah.
So just following on through from your comment, Mr Houghton, that the consultancy costs can be provided. Why didn't we use our own arboriculturist initially to write the proposed ash dieback policy back in September? Because it just appears that we have incurred a number of costs that could have been avoided. And as I've pointed out, someone who himself undertook contract research at Oxford University into rural rash decline, it just seems to have that resource and not utilise it, and to complement, obviously, to complement your green space manager. I can't understand that.
I think in hindsight, perhaps we would approach things differently. Is perhaps the easiest thing to say at this stage. Thank you.
Right, great. Yes.
Sorry, could I just ask a question why it's taken so long from September 24 to May 25 now? Is there any specific reason, or is it a culmination of reasons? Thank you.
Again, I apologise for the delay. I genuinely cannot recollect why. I think it was just a workload issue. So in terms of prioritising, I probably make a couple of wrong calls and probably should have given this some greater priority at the time, in reflection.
Yeah, great. Thank you for your honesty, Officer Marcus Hutton. Right, members, there's been a lot of input in here. I feel that we've got a good plan to go forward with, and I would like to see it approved to clean and green. So I move this recommendation personally, and do I have a seconder?
It's a second.
Great, thank you. So just to read the recommendation, to recommend to the Clean and Green Committee that the revised ash dieback action plan as appended to this report is approved. All those in favour? Great, that's fantastic, unanimous. Absolutely, thank you. Unanimous, yep. Right, thank you, members. Moving on to the last item, which is item 7, the Scrutiny Work Programme. The report begins on page 77 of the agenda. I would like to remind members of the process of adding items to this plan via the online form, which will then be considered. Do we have any questions on this? Yeah, go ahead, Councillor Barber.
I'll get mine in very quick at the start. Member portal. I think it was yourself when I first became a councillor. I think you were in opposition. We were in administration at the time, where you raised the portal issues, and then we went and replaced it with a new portal system, which is possibly worse, if that is possible, than the one that preceded it. And we all gave our feedback, I hope, and comments to the officers who requested it. Why do we have that coming back to us now in June, saying an action plan is being developed? I mean, in all honesty, I've worked in IT for 30, 40 odd years. With a portal case management system, it really doesn't take that long to come up with an action plan. You either build one in-house, you either outsource it, and you make sure if it's outsourced, you configure it as correctly. I just don't understand why we're still sitting here talking about a plan being developed at some abstract time in the future. The council will be abolished by the time we get the member portal working properly, and it is just very frustrating because it's not about whether we're inconvenienced or not, it's whether our residents are disadvantaged or not by the fact that some cases are not being actively tracked or progressed on our behalf, on their behalf. Cheers.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Barber. They're very good points, and indeed, yeah, it does worry me too that it could be the end of the council before this is resolved. I think when we sat down with officers a few months ago now, they realised that their processes are not in place, and that there needs to be some work with the constitutional working group, I think, as well, and it also needs to be going back to the Finance and Policy group, Committee. So these policies need to be worked up. We did get feedback on the portal, and we will be meeting, and Councillor Galton will be meeting with an officer from Rochford, I believe. I forget his name. Lee Hessian, that's it, next week, where we will be considering the feedback and working out an approach from there. More work than we realised, but hopefully it will be completed before the council's finished. One way of looking at it, I suppose, is we'll have something to pass on to the next authority so they get it right as well. Perhaps, maybe. Mr. Hand, Councillor Slade. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just confused as to why the woodland management plan is not actually on the working group. It was approved at committee. It's also on the minutes, including in January, where it clearly says officers confirmed that the woodland management working group will be added to the work programme. The membership, this was to be progressed outside of the meeting, and as I said at the start when we were discussing the minutes, it is referred in the minutes that I did request that this was reinstated. So I'm just would like to clarify that this will be on the working group at the next committee.
Marcus, yeah. Sorry, Officer Marcus.
I'm happy for it to be included if the chair wishes to consider the matter.
Yeah. Just to say that when I was looking through this forward plan, I did notice that under today's date, ash dieback policy, the summary has not been updated. That should be updated. It says a working group is being set up with outcomes to be reported at a future committee, and it also says working group members to be confirmed. Obviously that's out of date. Could that be corrected, please?
Yeah, that's happened. I think we'll take this away and get it corrected, because some of these have clearly happened and we've just approved it. I'm a bit reluctant to keep on putting it back onto it. I think we'll amalgamate this. Well, of our proposals, it goes to Clean and Green to be amalgamated with the tree management working group. But Councillor Slade, you've got something to say?
Chair, the ash dieback policy and the woodland management plan are two separate items, and both were put on to the working group. And as I said, it clearly states in the minutes that officer confirmed the woodland management working group. So I can provide all the documentation, but they are two very separate issues. And when we've already confirmed that the working group will be added to the work programme, there's been no discussion, there's been no communication as to why the woodland management group would be removed. It's been agreed, it's a separate issue, and we have it in the minutes.
Officer Mark Hudson, do you have anything to
I'm just genuinely slightly confused, so I apologise. But I'm fairly relaxed on this. So if you want to bring it back to scrutiny, and for September, then we can do so. But as a courtesy, I wonder if I could just speak to at least the chair of Clean Green first, just to discuss the matter first. Thank you.
I appreciate it. It's just obviously I think that both the officers will agree that the woodland management plan has brought up areas for discussion that I think look, the ash dieback action plan proved an effective, proved to be a really effective working group where we got this policy action plan in the condition that we have. I think there has been, well, I know that there's definitely areas of concern regarding the woodland management plan, and I just think that that deserves the respect of another working group and, you know, a good cross-party discussion.
So I think I agree with another work. I think the working group. I think if I could just perhaps take it away to discuss with the two chairs to either decide whether it comes to scrutiny initially or whether clean and green. Just out of courtesy, I think there was some confusion. I think there's a working group set up for clean and green originally on the working the woodland sort of working group. I think so. There's an expectation for it to go to there. But we can obviously ensure that membership is widened to that if people wish to be included. Because I agree, I think it was a very constructive working group. So I'd welcome doing more of that sort of work. Thank you.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Councillor Officer Marcus Hudden. Yeah, I'd rather consultation was in conjunction with Councillor David Worsfold and the Vice Chair, Elizabeth Gerard, as to what they want to do about working groups. I slide back and they can refer it back to us if they wish, but I'd rather they were consulted first. Thank you. Councillor Sled, yeah.
I do have one other question that's nothing to do with woodland ash. It's just regarding on page 83, 5th of November, with Scrutiny Work Programme with the infrastructure funding statement. But then we have it again under the 4th of June. And again, the description, the additional information don't seem to tie up. So can I ask why this item's on twice, and obviously why the additional information seems to contradict?
I think, as we discussed previously, is that we have to make this infrastructure funding statement every year, so it's got to come back to scrutiny for the next year to be considered. So I think that's the process. I'm pretty sure it is, but we can take it offline with Emma Goodins and get clarification on that. Yep.
You say it's on here twice, so are you?
Yeah. So the first one for today is for the one we just discussed.
Right, fine.
Next
okay.
one, November, I believe, is for the next year. Yep.
Right.
Yep, 24, 25.
Thank you.
So, sorry, Councillor Keith, unless there's a point on this one,
this
I'll go to Councillor
It's not tree related. Back in January, it was about 2 or 3 weeks after the Chief Executive of this council issued an apology in public for the triaging of homeless cases within the borough. I did ask that we include the process review of that in the scrutiny programme, and it was suggested at the time, and quite reasonably so, that because housing were actively working on it, that it was too early to do so now, at that point in time. So can I ask now that it is added into this coming year, because I think that was fairly universally accepted across the chamber as being an appropriate check and a balance to make sure that we've dotted the I's and crossed the T's properly on the homeless issue. Thank you.
So the best thing to do, put it through the scrutiny referral template. It'll come to officers, we'll consider it. But I do remember what you said, and I think we're waiting for it to come to the working group as well. But if you could put it through the scrutiny referral template, we'll have a look and add it to the programme if necessary. Thank you. Councillor Marty Cuthbert, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, so I'm obviously not a regular member of this committee. However, well, I'm not sure if this has come up before or it's been dealt with. There is no IT programme, well, apart from the members' portal, no actual specific IT programme around existing hardware in the council. There's potential issues quite soon with operating systems going out of date, hardware being supported, and things like that. It will affect us, particularly with the devices that we have at the moment, if people use them, but potentially the whole council as well. And I just wondered if there was any programme that had been done to make sure that this is going to be sorted by the middle of October, or you know, or something that might need to be added or looked at. So.
So myself and Councillor Hugh Gordon have raised about the devices, and my understanding is that Officer Lee Harrison will be taking this on board. But I think Officer Paul Price, do you want to come in first before I go any further?
Yes, we are fully aware of those things, and there is a programme partly done. Some of the bits that you haven't mentioned that we're also having to think about, but yeah, we'll pick that up with Lee. And I'm not sure what the reporting is on that, but I know there will be some reports coming forward and some conversations with members as well. Okay.
Officer Paul Price, are you able to confirm? I imagine there's some serious slippage here on this one. Is that correct? Yeah. Okay. Is there a way of possibly putting more alarm into this, given that the longer this goes on, the greater risk there is, and it will show up in the audit committee that the risk isn't what would be. There will be a detriment to the risk factor on this if we're not keeping on board with the programme, essentially.
I can assure all members that the IT department is very aware of the risks and is minimising those risks on a daily basis. There is a programme in place. We all received a warning regarding the access to Marks and Spencer's and one others and how that happened. So overnight we have looked at how we terminate somebody from our IT systems, because that's how they got in. So there is certainly a red flag going up around all the security. It is something we need to be looking at. We are looking at it, and there is a programme, but it's a jigsaw puzzle, as we all know, and certainly device replacement, all those things are already in train. They're happening, I know that. So old devices will be disappearing. So yeah, the secure network, there's lots of things that are going to be happening over the next few months, but I'll let the IT department do something around that, and we'll get assurance to members, whether that's through a report or some other medium.
Okay, great, thank you. Yes, Councillor Gelderbrand.
Thank you, Chair. I was just wondering about questions about enforcement procedure. Should I request that through the portal? Nothing case specific, but just in general, or should I go to Councillor Wagland and Councillor Rigby to put forward to the officers?
Yeah. So is this in relation to your referrals? Yes. Yeah. So the referral is still in consideration. We have spoken to Officer Goodings about it, who is working up an action plan for your referral. And we are still also working on the referral that both Councillor Wagland and Councillor Rigby also put in. So Emma Goodings is fully aware of it, and we're bringing up an action plan to bring forward to you hopefully soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Couldn't hear. Yep.
What was the point of clarification, sorry?
Chair, I couldn't hear, Chair. Sorry.
Okay, yeah. So there's been 2 referrals on planning matters, one from Councillor Gelderbloom, one that yourself and Councillor Ben Rigby have been working on. Emma Goodings is aware an action plan is being developed. We'll be coming back to hopefully the next committee with a way forward. Councillor Hugel.
Thank you, Chair. Just as a point of accuracy, I've also raised a planning referral to do with planning notifications, and I really don't want to see that forgotten.
No. No, absolutely. They all, in fact, all the scrutiny referrals have been forwarded to the relevant officers, and action plans are being worked up. The planning ones are quite technical, particularly the one that you've put forward, Councillor Wagner, with Councillor Ben Rigby, and will need legal input from advisors. Yeah. Councillor Ben Rigby.
Can I reassure the Chair that when one has capable members, technical challenges are but nothing?
Yeah. I think at some point, Councillor Wagland, the four of us will be working closely on your referral. And Councillor Gelderman, your referral was definitely not forgotten, but it's been raised with Emma Gooding. She's aware. We're working on an action point. Thank you. Any other questions, members? Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Right. Yes, I would like to see the processes and arrangements in relation to the Ombudsman decision, the new operational procedures coming forward and being looked at by this committee. I think, as I said, 28 days looks long. I think giving advice on rights at Section 82 in closure letters is not good enough and might not be appropriate depending on the individual circumstances. But all of that could be dealt with by a working committee or whatever, or could be dealt with by coming back so that we can see. And I think I would like to see ultimately, but this would be a matter for consideration when it comes back, some sort of customer satisfaction survey so that we actually see how it appears to those who are on the receiving end of it. At the moment, I can tell you from my researches that the vast majority of people in this area simply don't think that if they make an environmental complaint, anything will happen about it, which is one of the reasons why I seem to have spent all today making phone calls to individual companies who have been causing nuisances outside one of our local developers, because there is a concern about that. But be that as it may, I think this was a sufficiently serious matter. I appreciate I may not have succeeded on that point as far as the other side of the chamber is concerned. But I think it's sufficiently serious that the Scrutiny Committee should see how that builds up and how it progresses. Thank you.
Okay. That may well be the case, and I'll reiterate, as I have done in this meeting already and in previous meetings, there is a scrutiny referral form. If you do have referrals, please use that form because it helps organise not just ourselves but the whole committee as to what we do going forward on the work programme. So sounds good. So let's have the scrutiny referral form and we'll give it consideration, see if we can allocate time to it.
Okay. That wasn't the approach that was taken by Officer Claire Mayhew the last time I raised this point, and she accepted that we didn't have to do that, and my request for this has arisen out of the debate we've just had, so I couldn't have put it in the form, and Officer Claire Mayhew agreed that in such circumstances it was perfectly proper to do it without the form. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, if you go back to the time, I think you find the recommendations for the scrutiny work programme were different. They've now been changed. There's only one recommendation, and if you want to hear something to be considered, scrutiny referral form. Thank you.
Chair, I really couldn't hear that. I couldn't hear your last words. When
you discussed this with Officer Claire Mayhew, the recommendations for the scrutiny work programme were different. They've now been changed. There's not new change, but they have been changed. All referrals go through the scrutiny referral form on the council portal. Councillor Ben Rigby.
Thank you, Chair. I'll try to be brief. In relation to the review of outside bodies, as we approach the end, however mourned, of this council, the need to review the external bodies annually may change because, given that we may have but a short lifespan left, it may not be as necessary to review them quite as frequently as that, particularly as we get closer to the day in which our ultimate form, and like Doctor Who, regeneration is known. And so I would just suggest that be noted because when it may be better to consider whether it's needed to do that every year, or perhaps as we approach dissolution, that the outside bodies be appointed for a period that's perhaps slightly longer. But it's an observation, not a request.
Yeah, observed. We'll be having a outside organisation meeting with Amy next week, so I'll raise it there. Thank you. Sorry, Councillor Gerald. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd just like to go back on the environmental health one, because we do take it seriously, and Councillor Wagland made it seem like we don't take it seriously. We do. Now, we voted on the recommendation, which was to review the progress, which we did. We said we're happy to pass that. But I do agree with you that we should be looking at how the process is working, whether the procedures are right. We've already talked about having lessons learned. That's very important, making sure that we do learn those lessons, we put it into action, and if it doesn't work, we change it to make sure that it does work. And I think having an item back would be very helpful. Thank you.
Right, great, thank you everybody. So I will move the recommendation. Do I have a seconder?
Happy to second.
Great, thank you. Members, recommendation 1 that the committee approves its current work programme as set out in Appendix A. All those in favour?
That's unanimous, Chair.
Yeah, that's unanimous.
No. Oh, my apologies. Sorry.
Sorry, Councillor Wagland. So it's not unanimous. All those against?
I will abstain until I see my point reflected in the document.
Right, yeah, yep. Okay.
The motion's carried, Chair.
Motion's carried, thank you. There are no other items of business. That wraps up this committee. Thank you all for your attendance and input. Good night.